Writer's Dream. I'm Karen Bonnet. This is a show that features authors and their experiences with writing, marketing, promoting their books. And today we are pleased to welcome Jack Bilello, who is the author of Bonds of War, I Still Love Joni James, American Patrol, and his very latest book is called The Heart of a Lion. And welcome,
Well,
Jack.
thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah.
So tell us first about your background, a little bit about you.
Okay. Born in Brooklyn and raised in Brooklyn, in the East New York section of Brooklyn. Went to school, public schools, including Brooklyn Technical High School. Then went to City College of New York, Brooklyn College, and the American University of Beirut, Lebanon, on a Fulbright scholarship.
That's very, very different.
So then I started teaching and taught all my professional career for close to 40 years, and became chairman of a history department and started writing rather late in life, but I did have a lot of stories inside of me that I knew I wanted to tell.
Yeah, I'm sure you have you were a history teacher, so I'm sure a lot of your books have to do with that.
Always have a historical theme to it, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what inspired you to write your first book. What was the first one again?
The Bonds of War. Yeah, when I was a child in East New York, Brooklyn, my parents took me to see a movie that to this day probably had the most dramatic impact on me. It was during World War II, and the name of the movie was called The Fighting Sullivans. It was a true story about 5 brothers from Waterloo, Iowa, and they were killed, all of them, in a battle, the naval battle for Guadalcanal, on Friday the 13th for the Trescadacophobics amongst us, and on 1942. And the movie was so powerful and so poignant that it always stayed with me. So when the time came, I knew I wanted to tell that story, and I was able to tell a story about World War II and the Vietnam War, and make sure that the father, who was a World War II veteran, the son, who was a Vietnam veteran, are able to come together after they've been estranged for many years.
Oh, it sounds like a wonderful story. So how long did it take you to put that story together?
Oh, good year and a half. Good year and a half from the first draft to the, and you know, as we all know, those of us who are writing, that good writing is rewriting.
Yes.
So it takes you
over
at least
over.
5, 6, 7 rewritings until you feel it's ready, and you have to know and feel that it's ready.
I know.
And sometimes you're searching for the perfect word.
Yes.
Before it's ready.
I know. I remember, when I wrote my book, how many times I must have edited. It was hundreds of times, especially when I sent it out to the traditional publishers, and I'd get that rejection letter, and then I'd go back to edit it again. So how has writing these books impacted your life, and which of these books is the most dear to your heart?
Well, the book right here, I Still Love Joni James. Joni James, believe it or not, was the #1 singer in the country in the early 1950s. She was like the Lady Gaga of her time, or really, no one was more popular than Joni James.
What type of music did she sing?
She slow ballads, romantic songs, the very, very nice songs that. And I remember watching a movie. There was a young Italian man who couldn't grasp success until he thought he had to change his name. So he changed his name to Evan Hunter. And the reason he picked Hunter, because he had gone to Hunter College.
Okay.
So he then wrote The Blackboard Jungle, which was made into a movie, The Young Savages, which was made into a movie, and did the screenplay for Rebel Without a Cause, which was James Dean, one of his 3 movies before he died. And in The Blackboard Jungle, there's a scene there where Joni James is prominent in terms of being mentioned by the young toughs in the movie. So she was very, very popular and then disappeared. Have you ever heard of Joni James?
I've never heard of her. I was a child in the 50s, and I loved all the songs my parents loved because they played music so much.
Ask your parents if
I'll have to find out
heard of Joni James.
My mother, yeah.
But the point being is that all ages, as Margaret Mitchell reminded us, are gone with the wind. They have their time in place and space, and then other times replace it. So all ages are gone with the wind, and the 50s, of course, are gone with the wind. But the past is not something that we want to live in, but it's very nice to visit there from time to time.
It is.
And this is a visit.
I love historical fiction books.
This is a visit to the past, Brooklyn in the 1950s, with the Brooklyn Dodgers and Coney Island all prominently featured in there.
Right, that sounds great. Yeah. And now let's turn to, these books are fiction books for adults. And then these first three, and then you wrote Heart of a Lion, which I know it's a nonfiction book for young adults.
Right, it's called creative nonfiction, which is a very interesting genre, which I've taken to, because you tell a true story in the form of a novel.
Right.
So I like that format, you know. And this is a Civil War story, The Heart of a Lion. And right now we are experiencing and commemorating the 150th anniversary of the American Civil War.
Yeah, amazing.
This is not only timely, I think, the story, but it's timeless, because the issues that one deals with are still with us. Yeah. The Civil War really was to shape what kind of a nation we were to become from the middle of the 19th century on. I mean, all events of significance prior to the Civil War were really the prelude to the Civil War.
Right.
And all events after the Civil War, even as we see today, there's talk of secession. Right. Texas wants to secede from the Union.
It all comes back.
It's right. So it's civil rights, the Voting Rights Act that we're experiencing now, that the Supreme Court is reviewing. So these issues are very timely and timeless. And this is a story close to my heart, too, because it's the story of a school teacher.
Which is what you were.
A school teacher, my career.
Yeah.
Who commanded nothing but the respect of his students until he commanded a regiment in the Civil War and became a great warrior. He was awarded our nation's highest decoration for valor and bravery, the Medal of Honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor. His name was Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. Okay. School teacher from Maine. He was 34 when the Civil War started in 1861. He didn't have to join, but he said two things, really, which I thought was fascinating. He says, I'm going to join the Army, and I'm going to stay in that Army until one of two things happens. Either I am killed in combat, or the Union is saved. Okay. And indeed, the Union was saved, slavery was ended, and he survived. It was unbelievable experience. So
this is based on a true story?
Oh, yeah, this is historic or creative nonfiction.
His true name, or are you?
Yeah, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, definitely. He was so badly wounded in two battles that he read his own obituary in the New York Times. Now, how many people could say
That's
twice?
Very
he read
unusual.
it twice. His own obituary in the New York Times, that he was reported killed in action at Petersburg, and then later on at the 12 Oaks, toward the end of the war. But he's a fascinating character. He is the last Civil War veteran to die of his battle wounds.
Really?
Official cause of death. He died of his battle wounds in 1914 at the age of 85.
Isn't that funny?
It's a great story.
That sounds like a great book. I'll have to look into that book. Let's discuss writing now, because I know that you wrote these books, some of them way back in years back. What was your favorite aspect of the writing process for you? What did you enjoy most?
The thing is, do you really inside of you have a story that you feel is worth telling, and you would want an audience to feel the same way? Right. And the thing that I try to do, I get back to a young fella from Seaford, Long Island, not far from where I live in Massapequa, who went to Seaford High School. Then he went to, I believe, Iona College, started coaching at Iona College, and then became the head coach at North Carolina State University. His Wolfpack, the nickname of the school, won the national championship. And right now we're going to be going through the March Madness any day now, where colleges will be competing for the national championship in basketball. They won the national championship, and he never had a chance to savor and enjoy it because he was stricken with a fatal form of cancer. And his name was Jim Valvano. And right before he died, I'm talking about within a week or two before he died, he was invited to the ESPY Awards, ESPN Annual Awards, and he gave a speech. And it left a lifetime memory for me, an impression that to this day carry with me. He said, if we could do possibly in every day in our lives 3 things, how well we would go on with the business of living.
Yeah.
He says, if we could laugh every day, a real good laugh. He says, there's nothing more human, nothing that really makes us more human than a good
how
laugh,
good it makes
a
you
belly
feel.
laugh, he said.
Yeah.
And if we could cry every day, which I thought was very interesting.
Compassionate.
Emotion. Don't be afraid to have emotions, to
Right.
show your emotions.
Yeah.
And if we could think every day, but not about what we're going to wear or what we're going to eat, but think about how do we fit in.
Slow yourself down a little bit because everybody's in a rush.
How do we fit in? How can we make ourselves better? How can we make the world a better place? So that when we leave this world, we could say or feel, or people would say, he left the world a little better place than he found it.
Right.
So if we could laugh and cry and think, that is his legacy to us. And literally, he died about a week or 2 after he made this wonderfully poignant and emotional speech.
And it really stuck with you.
It stuck with me. And I said, what I want to do, if possible, is to, when I write a book, to see if my audience can laugh.
Right.
Can shed a
Because
tear.
you want to connect with your readers.
Can shed a tear. And can think about something transcendent and important. Something that has some, as I say, timely or timeless significance to it. And that's what I hope to do. Whether I succeed is not up to me. It's up to it's up to the reader.
As an author, that's what you really what you want. You want to bring something that's enjoyable to read, that gives your readers an emotional connection to the characters and leaves an impression with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what we all try to do.
Exactly.
So now, as far as the challenges, tell me, were there any challenges in the writing process for you? Did you have writer's block? Did you have a hard time finding time in your day to write these stories since you were a teacher?
Yeah.
What did you do?
Once I started a project, once I commit myself, then I work every single day, 7 days a week. And I'm not saying I work 8 hours a day. Some days I work 1 hour.
Right.
Some 2 or 3.
You discipline
but
yourself.
That's about the limit I do. Maybe it's no more than 3 hours, but every single day. And that's from the very beginning when I first, and by the way, I don't put anything on computer until after I complete the first draft.
Oh, you write it all out?
I write it on 9 by 14 legal pad because, first of all, I'm in computer preschool. I mean, that kind of thing. And second of all, I don't want anything to interfere with my heart, to my head, to my hand.
Yes.
It just has to, and I don't want to think about, typing or whatever. So everything comes out, everything. Then I put it on a computer, and then I start the editing process.
I know what you mean about writing it on paper. I don't do that now anymore, but years ago when I was an editor for papers, I felt it was much better for me to get what I really wanted to say on paper, and then I'd put it on the computer.
Exactly.
But it took more time that way.
But it's time well spent, because you don't want to leave anything out.
Right.
You don't want to say, Jesus, I should have put that in there.
Yeah, something about the connection between the brain and the heart and the hand.
You got it. You got it. Yeah.
Okay, so how about getting your ideas? Did you get ideas at different, like odd times? Did you wake up in the middle of the night and say, "Oh, I got to get this down on paper," or what did you do for that?
There's a really creative songwriter. I think his name is Leonard Cohen. Someone once asked him, "Where do you go for your ideas?" He said, "If I knew where to go for my ideas, I would visit that place more often." So, you never know where the idea is going to come from.
Right.
As I said, with the first book, it goes back to that movie that I saw, The Fighting Sullivans, where the scene where the Ward Bond, an old-time character actor, comes to visit the family, Thomas and Alida Sullivan in Waterloo, Iowa, and he says, Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, I'm afraid I have bad news for you. And Jenny Sullivan, the only daughter who's the only one married, says, which one was it, Al? And the mother says, which one was it? And he says, 2 words. Imagine this parents feeling all 5.
Oh my goodness.
It was, like you say, it took your breath away. All 5.
terrible,
And it's the only time in American history this has ever happened. In one battle, 5 boys from the family were killed. During the Civil War, 5 brothers were killed over the course of a war from the Barrett family.
Yes.
And Abraham Lincoln said
there was another movie about that, a similar type of theme.
Saving Private Ryan was about a true story about 3 brothers who were killed, and they went in to get the 4th brother out before he was
I remember that.
he was killed.
Yeah.
And that's the whole premise of Saving Private Ryan. And Abraham Lincoln wrote a letter to Mrs. Barrett during the Civil War, honoring the memory of her 5 fallen sons over the course of 4 years. So the tragedy, the unspeakable horror of war I wanted to capture and convey. And each of my books has some reference to World War II, or in this case, the Civil War. For example, in the Civil War, there was what they called soldier's heart. Soldier's heart were those soldiers who were devastated emotionally and psychologically by war.
Soldier's heart.
Soldier's heart, it was called.
Was it,
Soldier's heart in the Civil War was called shell shock in World War I.
Okay.
It was called battle fatigue in World War II, and today we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's all exactly the same.
Thing, but just names
exactly the same. In the Civil War, more than half the people in insane asylums, which was what they called them in those days, more than half the people were Civil War veterans. They never again, for the rest of their lives, saw the light of day.
They didn't have a normal life.
They spent the entire rest of their lives in insane asylum. That was the devastating psychological effect of that war, World War I, World War II, current. You could see what's happening to our veterans today every day. There were more veterans who committed suicide in the last year than were killed in combat.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing what you go through, I'm sure. Yeah. All right, well, let's go on to publishing and marketing and promoting, which is something that's very challenging for all of us as authors. Tell me, what do you do to market and promote your book currently?
Well, to begin with publishing, the first 2 books are this, Bonds of War and American Patrol. They were published by a traditional publisher, but a small publisher in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
And I was not happy to the extent that I felt I was doing all the work. I felt felt exploited.
Even as a traditional
publisher? I felt exploited. I was doing all the work, and the publisher, one of 4 or 5 in the firm, was making all the money. She sent me on a tour of Florida where I did 8 book signings in 7 days.
You get like a royalty or a couple of percentage.
Yeah, I was getting, I think, $1.70 a book. And I made about $300 in 8 days.
Yeah.
She made well over $3,000 in 8 days.
Well, you did all the work.
Yeah, and I was schlepping all over the place in Florida. and I said, no, this is let me take a shot at publishing on demand. So the last 2, this and this, were publishing on demand.
Right.
And I'm more in control. I have the rights. If a traditional publisher has an interest in it, I can clearly do something like that. But I feel like
you're in control.
I'm in control, and I feel that I'm doing better.
See that?
With the finances and the profits.
Because you make whatever you pay for the book, the rest is yours.
The rest is mine.
Which is good. And then if you sell it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, of course, you get a small royalty for that.
The book is available on all the Ingram, I think, or Baker & Taylor is the distributor for the books.
Right.
And I get a royalty check from the company. And then I have the opportunity to sell it on my own, and I do. I do schools and I do libraries and schools and other programs, other venues. So
they're very responsive.
Schools. No doubt. Especially this book now, which is the Civil War, and in the 5th grade they study the Civil War, and in the 8th grade they study the Civil War.
So you have a good
so it couldn't be more
there.
timely, and that's going to be for another couple of years. This July is the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg.
Oh, I've been to Gettysburg.
Oh,
Such
sure,
an
right?
interesting
Isn't
place.
it incredible?
My husband's a big history buff.
Okay, great.
We've been there.
So, this Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, when he was given the assignment of defending Little Round Top. And that was the end of the Union line. The Union Army ended at Little Round Top. And he was told by Strong Vincent, his immediate commander, no retreat, no surrender. You've got to defend that, because if the Confederate Army takes Little Round Top, they will outflank the entire Union force, and the cause is lost, the battle is lost. So he did. And that's why he won the Congressional Medal of Honor with